Welcome, everyone. I'm Mindy Farmer. I'm the director of the May 4 Visitors Center. I'm joined by Lori Bowes, who is the assistant director of the May 4 Visitors Center, and we're really happy to be here tonight. We're going to go quickly. Do know that if you come to the center, there's a lot more information about everything we talk about here. So we're not going to cover everything. We're not even going to be able to talk about every point on the slides we present, but we want to give an overview of our history. And this really is, when we say our history, it's the history of the May 4 Visitors Center, but we know that this is also the history of Northeast Ohio. And every time we do one of these presentations, we hear from people who we've never heard before, who have amazing stories. If you're one of those people, please know that we're actively collecting oral histories. You can find out more about that from the May 4 Oral History site. And also know that we are temporarily closed. We really are excited to see everyone, but we're doing some upgrades. So keep a watch on our website, May 4, or www.kent.edu/May4 to find out more about when we reopen. We hope to reopen, and we'll almost certainly reopen this fall. So to get started, one of the things we like to do in the center is give a national overview and then a little bit of the local story. So there are 3 galleries in the beginning of the center. So this is a picture of the Freedom Riders. But if you don't know who the Freedom Riders are, you certainly should learn about them because they are very brave and they're very important. If you know anything about the civil rights movement of the 1960s, you may know that transportation was really important. You may have heard about the Montgomery bus boycott, for instance. And one of the reasons why transportation is so important because it's an everyday reminder of segregation. So if you have a job and you don't have a car, every single day you have to ride to your workplace a segregated bus. And every single day you come home on a segregated bus. So it makes sense that segregation was that transportation was a target of segregation, of desegregation. And one of the things we do in this course really highlight the student experience. And this is an example where young people really made a difference. This is not the local bus system, this is the national bus system. So just like if you wanted to go to work, if you wanted to travel to see your family in a different state, or if you wanted to go cross country, you had to travel by buses if you couldn't afford airplanes, which were very expensive, and if you didn't have a car. So the Freedom Riders are a group of young people, students mostly. It was a really amazing group of a coalition, really, of different civil rights organizations. So CORE, which is the, Lori, I'm gonna forget, the Congress of Racial Equality. SNCC, which is the Students Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So a big group of student groups. And what they would do is they would start in cities that were considered safer, and they would ride through the South and they would make their routes known. And because they made their routes known, they were very often the targets of white supremacists, the KKK, and this is an example of that. The police knew they were coming. This is in Alabama. It's Mother's Day, actually, 1961. And the Freedom Riders get into Anniston, Alabama. The police purposely don't show up to give their attackers, who they know are coming and probably are known to them, time to attack them. They get away, they're attacked again, and this is that second attack. Luckily, no one died in this attack, but this was very violent. And even though we call it the civil rights movement, there was quite a bit of violence. And Kent State student or a Kent State student did take part in this. This is, you can see Danny Thompson. He heard the call to join the Freedom Riders. He joined the Freedom Riders and was arrested and put into one of the most infamous prisons in Mississippi for his participation. Linked to this is another student movement. This is the free speech movement. This is in Berkeley. It's 1964 to 1965. This is sometimes cited as one of the first instances where students, especially on a college campus, bind together to really invoke change. So at Berkeley, prior to 1964, while students were participating in a number of things, including the civil rights movement and specifically the freedom ride movements, they weren't allowed to advertise their participation or try to recruit people on campus. That was prevented. So when students went to do that, the police came, they tried to remove them, students gathered around, and it set off this year-long push for free speech. And it was successful. In the end, the rules were changed. Students were able to advertise any manner of groups. You see that on college campuses today. Anytime you show up, especially in the beginning of the semester, you'll see groups of all kinds. And that's in part, large part due to the free speech movement. And Kent State had its movements too. This is not the free speech movement, but this is, I think, an amazing look at students using their power. So here we have Berkeley, here we have Kent State. This is perhaps, I would actually argue, the best example of students acting collectively here at Kent State. This is the Black United Students Walkout. Lori, do you want to talk about that?
So the Oakland, California Police Department came to Kent State to recruit students to work for them, and they were known for their racial brutality against the Black Panther Party. So students at Kent State, Black United students, worked together with Students for a Democratic Society to disrupt that interview process. So they came to campus to interview students to become police officers in California. And so students at Kent State said, we don't want this recruiting to happen. We don't want these police officers on campus. So they take over the building where the interviews are going to happen. They don't let the interviews happen. And as you can imagine, the university was very upset. It was embarrassing, or so they thought to them. So they let the students know that we're involved, the Students for a Democratic Society and the Black United Students, that they were going to expel the students that were involved in this protest. So Black United students really mobilized, and a majority of the Black students that were on campus decided that they were gonna, if you're gonna expel some of our students, you're gonna have to expel all of us. So they decided to have a mass walkout. This was the main gate of campus at the time. They planned the walkout through the main gate and left campus. And they wanted it known that they thought, you know, college was really important. And so they formed a college in absentia, took buses to the Akron area, used churches, held classes, held teach-ins, and just told the university, we're not coming back until you rethink what you're doing. And so obviously, with this many students walking out, the university decided to walk back, expelling anyone. And so it's the first time at Kent State where students use collective action to get what they want from the university.
One of the other things we address in the center is what's called the generation gap. Generation gaps are very normal. If you have any teenagers in your life, you may know that they may not dress like you. And if you are a teenager, you may know that your parents don't dress like you. You may listen to different music. You may even communicate differently. I think all the old folks like myself now are on Facebook, as opposed to, I don't even know.
TikTok.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's totally normal and expected and a part of every life in general. But in the 60s, this gap was particularly large. And we can see how it plays out in all kinds of manners. So we can see here, this is David Crosby of Crosby, Stills and Nash, and his father, who is famous in his own right. And when students come through, we like to ask, what would the two of them talk about? You can see they dress differently. They're probably listening to different music. This is Nat King Cole versus Janice Joplin. And it plays out here in Kent too. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is the Kent State hippie commune. So there was no doubt. And underpinning all of this was what we talked about earlier, the civil rights movement. It's not all young people who participated in it, but it is a number of young people. Also fueling this divide is this. This is one of the most important artifacts we have in the museum, because you can't talk about this period without talking about the Vietnam War. So this is the draft board of 1970. What they did is they went on TV just like Maximilian and pulled out numbers, and your number represented your draft number. And everyone watched. This was December at the end of the year, but it took place over 1970. Young people, what the draft meant was that young people are going to be recruited to fight in a war that some of them may not have supported, or they otherwise would not have chosen to join. And you can see here and find your number and know that everyone under 195 was drafted. So for college students in particular, this was important. Now, at the time, you couldn't vote in every election. You may be able to vote in a local election, but you couldn't vote for president, for example, if you were under 21. So if you can't vote, and you oppose the war, what are you going to do? And that's one of the reasons we see students protest in such great numbers in this period, because that's how they're pushing the government to end the war, where their friends, and almost everyone knew someone, may be sent to fight in a war they might not support.
So I think it's interesting to note that a year after the shootings here at Kent State, the 26th Amendment gets added to the Constitution, lowering the voting age to 18. And Nixon felt like if they lowered the voting age, that students would stop protesting. So all of the students that were killed at Kent State were all under the age of 21. None of them could vote at the time. So I think that's an interesting point. The other thing is we have this exact draft poster hanging in the visitor center. And when we have young people come through, when we have our freshmen come through, they all cluster around this. They try to find their draft number. And it's after they see this that they start to realize, yes, I probably would have been at this protest had I been at Kent State.
And there's a whole nother conversation that we won't have right now, but about the fairness and the inequality of this. It was very expensive to go to school. So it was a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but some people certainly consider people who are protesting on a college campus privileged. In fact, some of the guardsmen joined because they didn't want to be sent overseas, because at the time the guard did not go overseas. So there are all kinds of divides tied to this. And we also know that women were not eligible. That didn't mean women weren't impacted by the Vietnam War. They certainly were, but they weren't able to be drafted, and still are not drafted. And there's all kinds of income. There were lots of people who were able to buy their way out of this, and there are also people who went to Canada. There are all kinds of inequities with this draft that we are happy to talk about at any other point, and is important for us to look back at. And just to drive home this point, this is one of the largest protests in Kent State history. This is the anti-war protest. It's part of the moratorium march, which had two parts. One part was the college part, where colleges across the campus marched on a single day. And then there was the DC part, where people, not just college students, went and protested in downtown DC, and it was enormous. What's interesting about this, right here underneath the A is Allison Krauss, one of the 4 students killed on May 4, 1970. She attended both this college part and she collected money to go down to DC. So certainly some of the people in the crowd on May 4 were protesters. Some of them weren't. But it's amazing to see Allison in this video. This is also an example of where we gave these talks and someone found this and donated it to the library. So we're still actively collecting material, not necessarily us, but the May 4 archive, should you have something of value.
I think it's also interesting to, go ahead, sorry.
No, you go.
So Allison, when she started as a freshman, was in the fall of 1969. Classes started in late September because they were on quarters. This protest happens October 15th. So she isn't even here a month. And she finds this group of anti-war protesters, and she's at the very front of the protest holding the banner. So she's a very active anti-war protester from the beginning.
I'm gonna play just a little bit of that. Know that this music came with it. This is not something we added. This was found by a gentleman who had cut it together from his own personal video. So that brings us to the May 4 story. And when we start the May 4 story, we usually start on April 30th, 1970. And the dates and the days of the week are important here. So this is Thursday. And the importance of this date is President Nixon goes on TV. Now, there aren't very many TV stations. There's certainly no Netflix. So a lot of people are watching the same thing. So a lot of people are watching this. And he makes an announcement. The announcement itself is not a surprise. What's a surprise about this is this had already been taking place. So what he's doing, you can see in his map here, he's pointing to Cambodia. Cambodia is a neutral country in the war. But because it's neutral, our enemies in the Vietnam War are using it as a staging area. And what President Nixon announces is that the United States military will target those staging areas in an effort to end the war faster. And what's unique about that, that had already been taking place. It's called Operation Menu because there are breakfast, lunch, and dinner runs. They'd already been bombing these targets. So it's not clear, and that's a great area of research to find out more about why this happened. But when it does happen, it almost automatically starts protest because President Nixon had run on a platform of ending the Vietnam War. And even though he's making the argument that this could bring about a faster end, for a lot of people, this is seen as an expansion of the war because it's targeting Cambodia, which is a neutral country.
Right. And so if you need so many people to be at war with Vietnam and then we invade another country, they're going to need more people. So students see it as they're going to need more of us to fight this war now in Cambodia that's gone into Cambodia.
So that next Friday, students gather. This is a group of history students. What's interesting about this, there's a great book, if you're interested, by Tom Grace that really goes in the detail of the Kent Start part of this story. And it wasn't until I read his book that I realized that some of these gentlemen are veterans. Because at the time, a lot of students were using their veterans package to come back to school. So some of these gentlemen had fought in the war. So they organize and they are protesting against President Nixon's announcement. And you can see there's a book here. We think that's the book where they tore out a copy of the Constitution and buried it. You can see the shovels because they feel like this, it goes against the Constitution. And this is a smallish by then standards, kind of a big one today. You can see people gathered here. And it's here that they call for the protest that will take place on May 4, 1970. So they want a bigger protest. This one was was basically planned overnight. And so they call here for a bigger protest to take place on Monday, May 4th.
I think it's interesting too, the ROTC building. I don't know if you can see is my cursor moving, or do you want to?
I'm moving mine.
Okay. So later on, the ROTC building gets burned. These are ROTC buildings. They're old wooden World War II barracks that they moved in after World War II when the GI Bill took place. For when men came onto campus, there was no housing for them. So they moved these World War II barracks in to house those men for the GI Bill. And then that's one of those buildings later gets burned as part of this May 4th story.
You can also see that people are dressed in shorts. It looks like a nice day. And by all accounts, it was one of the first warm days after a really tough winter. So this is midday, this is noon. That night, students and people from all around gather in Kent. Kent's a very popular place now, as it was then, for bands to play live. So people are going to see bands. Some people are going to watch the basketball game. And there are still people upset about the Cambodian incursion or invasion, whatever you want to call it. So things do start to get a little out of hand. Someone throws a beer bottle at a police cruiser, someone shakes a car, someone lights a trash can on fire in the middle of the street. There's a motorcycle gang doing tricks. And the police put in a call to the governor to put him on alert. And it's that night that the National Guard starts to make their way to Kent. It's also that night, and these are all tied together and happen kind of at the same time, that the police make what I think most people would argue is a mistake, because they decide to end all that. They'll close all the bars. And what that does is put lots of people, some who are angry about Cambodia, some who are just there to see a band play, some who are just there to see the basketball game. It puts them all into the streets, and they are all funneled the same way to their cars. And it's no surprise then that there is some vandalism. There's no question there was vandalism. And some of that vandalism is very anti-Cambodia invasion. Some of it is just rocks thrown into windows. So with that, the National Guard's put on alert and they start to make their way. The next day starts out quiet. In fact, we know that some of the students who were there in downtown that night before go back to try and help repair some of those broken windows. And it's another nice day, but that night, there's another protest. That night, students start to gather at the Victory Bell, the same place where that earlier protest had taken place. And they do call for the burning of the ROTC building. The ROTC building is a Reserves Officer Training Corps. And many ROTC buildings are targeted across the country because if you're on campus, they're basically representing the war in the eyes of the students on campus. So it's not surprising that they're targets of protests, and this was not the first time at Kent it was a target of the protest. And it's not, Kent is by no means the only school that had ROTCs targeted. In fact, many were burned. Well, not many. We do know of it. I think the last time we looked, around 30. The students gather, they walk around the dorms, they try and get more people to come, and eventually they do try to start to catch the building on fire. They throw Molotov cocktails. They try and light one of the curtains on fire. And when the firemen come, they try and cut their hoses and prevent them from being able to put out the fire. So the police come next. The firemen are escorted by the National Guard, and the students are dispersed. Students believe that, or some of the students who were there believe that the fire was put out when they were dispersed. So there is still some unknowns here. Many of them believe that they either let it burn, or there was even something called an agent provocateur, that they purposely set it on fire. But many of the students who were there believed this fire was out when they left. And we don't have enough evidence to say exactly what happened. But what we do know for sure is that this caused the National Guard to come on campus. And it isn't a small number. It's over 750, or is it 650?
I think it's 675. Yeah.
Okay. Over 650 guardsmen come onto campus. Is there anything I missed, Lori?
Now, I think it's interesting to note too that no one's arrested for the burning of the ROTC building. The Kent State Police are there. The Kent City Police are there. No one's arrested. So we don't really know who started it, why it went up, why it continued to burn. That's still kind of a mystery.
So that brings us to the next day. This is Sunday. The guard is there guarding the ROTC building. You can see that. We also have the governor. Now, Governor Rhodes is in a primary campaign against a very tough opponent. And he's a Republican, and like Republicans, many Republicans today, he wanted to seem tough on crime. So he comes here specifically to make that case. And so he tours the burnt out ROTC, he goes to the firehouse and he makes his speech. And he calls the students who did this the worst type of people in the world. He compares them to the Klan, and he compares them to the Nazis. He calls them worse than the Night Riders, which is the Klan, and worse than the brown shirts, which is the Night Riders. And he says, quote, "We must eradicate this problem." So imagine being a student on campus after all this weekend of happenings. Imagine also being a guardsman on campus, just being told by your governor that you need to end this, that this needs to be eradicated. And you can start to understand the tensions people are feeling. We won't go much into this, but I also want to mention that the president is gone this weekend. So on top of that, there's a lot of confusion at Kent State's campus over who's in charge and what's happening. So that adds to the tensions as well. In fact, there's a protest that night, Sunday night, where the students gather and demand to talk to the president. They're told the president's coming, but instead of the president coming, they're dispersed with tear gas. And they just have to run. They have to run into whatever building they can find. And it's that night that 2 students are bayoneted. So that brings us to May 4. So that noon protest that had been planned just Friday before becomes about so much more. And there are so many more students. There are students not just because the campus is occupied. All night, there were helicopter flights you could hear if you were in the dorms or even in the city. There are National Guard checkpoints on every road. You probably, when you walked to class, you may have seen the big encampment that was in the middle of campus where they're all spending the night. It's hard to, maybe even impossible to ignore that things are happening. This is also lunchtime. And this is next to what was the student union, so where you would go to lunch. And lots of people are walking by and they end up stopping to see what's happening. There are also lots of examples. We have plenty of oral histories of students being told by their professors that they should attend. So there are lots of people here for lots of reasons. And here, this is a great photo because you can see everything again. You can see this burned ROTC, which you could see in that first picture we showed. You can see the big line of guard, and you can see the students here. And you can kind of understand the miscommunication. So remember, there are no cell phones. The guard is yelling at the students to disperse. They're in a little Jeep with a megaphone. Lots of people claim they can't hear because the students are also chanting, and they're not chanting nice words. They are angry. So this is not, they're not saying kind things. So you can imagine what's happening. And the guard decides to basically here this line splits in two because they want to disperse the students who are on this hill. And it's the guard that will go this way that will do the shooting. The guard here actually are from Ravenna, and they will end up in the parking lot. And so here's the beginning of this maneuver. You can see the students. You can see there are more than just on the hill. You can see them here gathered in Taylor Hall. You can see them on the hill, and you can see the guard marching to disperse them. And this is a good example of where you can see what they did. So Troop G and A, they go up the hill, they march past the pagoda, and they get into this, what is a practice football field. So they're actually kind of boxed in a little way because there's fencing on 3 of the sides. It's here where they kneel, and this is where they first aim at students, but do not shoot. And it's as they're coming back, they shoot at students. So this is another famous photo from that day. This is Alan Canfora, who passed in December. And this is the first time they kneel and point their weapons. They do not shoot, but they will end up shooting and injuring Alan Canfora.
Before you change this picture, so this photo was taken, I think, by John Philo. And he was a photography major, and his professor said to the class, I want you to go to this protest and I want you to capture the spirit of the American student protester. So John Philo runs out with his camera. He captures this picture of Alan Canfora waving this black flag, which Alan made he made 2 black flags because a friend of his had been killed in the Vietnam War the week before, and they had gone to the funeral. And then when Nixon announces this invasion of Cambodia, he comes a little late to the protest because he's busy at home making these flags. And as he's walking up to the protest, one of the guardsmen says to him, hey boy, what are you carrying? And he said, I have 2 black flags protest. And he says to him, well, we're going to make you eat those later. So while he's in this area waving this black flag and they kneel, his sister comes over. She's a year behind him at Kent and says, Alan, things are getting a little dicey. They're starting to, aim their guns at you. We might want to think about getting out of here. And he says, well, I just want to stay a couple minutes more and see what's going to happen. And just as he says that, they get up and start their maneuver back up the hill.
And this is the moment that they shot. So it's 13 seconds, 67 shots. They kill 4 students and injure 9 others, including Alan Canfora. This is another mystery. There are things we don't know. There are lots of arguments as to whether or not there was a call to fire. There was a tape released a few years ago where some people believe that shows that there was an order to fire. Some people are still not convinced. It's not clear, and there are all kinds of hybrid theories. And like I said, there are things we just don't know for sure. They shoot into the parking lot, and this is the moment of the shooting. And this is the most famous photograph taken by John Philo. And this is Jeffrey Miller, Marianne Vecchio. Marianne Vecchio is a runaway. And this is how her family finds out where she is. It was common then for runaways to go to a college campus where they would be taken care of. But this changes her life forever. There's a really great article that came out this year, if you're interested. I think it was in the Washington Post.
Yeah, there's an interesting story about that. So John Philo takes that photo and knows that the FBI is going to come onto campus and confiscate film. So he jumps in his car after he finished shooting his roll of film, and he drives home. He grew up in a little town in Pennsylvania called Tarentum, Pennsylvania, and he worked as a stringer for their local newspaper. And he went into the newspaper office and said to the editor, hey, I think I have got some good shots of the shootings that happened at Kent State. So they let him develop a little bit of the film. And then the editor says, we want all of the film. So he uploads it on the Associated Press wire so that the FBI can't confiscate it. And as a junior photography student at Kent State, he wins a Pulitzer Prize for this photograph.
Yeah, the students who take these photographs, and it's largely students because this wasn't seen as a big news event. They really are one of the heroes in this story. Here's another hero. You can see here, this is after the shootings. The students are stunned, they're shocked. This has never happened in American history, never has the military fired on students. So they gather again, and the guard tells them they have 5 minutes to disperse. And this very popular professor, Alan Frank, or I'm sorry, Glenn Frank.
Yeah.
Alan Frank is his son who's in the crowd. Glenn Frank pleads with them that you must leave. He says this is only going to be a slaughter. And thankfully they listen. And as I mentioned, Alan Frank, his son, is in this crowd. Some people call this one of a second violation of the First Amendment rights because it was clearly peaceful and it was dispersed. So students leave. They have to pack up their things almost immediately. Campus is closed. Buses are taken, or they order buses. They're taken to big cities. There are all kinds of stories about how people get off campus because they just have to go. There's no therapy. There's no help for any of them. They're just shuttled off. They must leave. And these are the 4 students who were killed: Allison Krauss, William Schroeder, Jeff Miller, Sandy Shore. And we'll show some more pictures of them in just a bit. But I do want to talk a little bit about Kent State. It takes Kent State a while to come to terms with this. So the first memorial is not built until 1990. There are lots of plans for memorials, but they just don't happen. It's not until 1990 that the official memorial is built. And it doesn't officially name the 4 students who were killed. And it's only after the family pushes that they get a plaque with the names of the 4 students and the wounded. So even this is it's controversial. And it's only 30% of what's proposed. And again, that's a whole story that we're going to do an exhibit on in the fall or spring. Until 1999, you can park in the areas where the students were killed. In 1999, they put up markers, so that's no longer possible. It's not until 2010 that there's any curation of the site. So if you were going to come and you didn't know what was happening or where things were, you wouldn't have any bearing or mooring. So in 2010, they installed a walking tour, which is still there today. And then in 2012, the center's built. So this all takes some time. And this is a part of here's the first gallery, which is where we talked about social justice, the generation gap, Vietnam War. Second gallery, this is the start of that. This talks about the lead up to May 4, and it shows the 165 other universities we know that had protests related to the Cambodia announcement. After that, there's a film, and then there's the third gallery, which is the headlines that show that this was worldwide. It wasn't just a local story. And as part of our exhibits that we did, and that will be in the Lakewood Library in August, we reached out to the families and we found new photographs of the 4 students who were killed. So this is what they look like to much of the world, but this is what they really look like. This is Sandy Shore. She was in a sorority. She was a speech and hearing major. This is a part of a photographic session she took with her friends. This is Allison Krauss, incredibly friendly. This is her carrying things into her apartment as part of her move-in. You want to talk about Bill?
So this is Bill Schroeder and his sister Nancy when they were in high school on their way to a dance. So I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but we did do an exhibit on each of the 4 students that were killed, but about their lives. So that's where these photographs came from. So I think the next one is of Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Jeff Miller's on the far left. He was the youngest in his family. And so Mindy and I worked with the families to do these exhibits. So I worked with Russ, Jeff's older brother, to create his exhibit. And it was really sweet. His mother was alive. She was the last parent that was alive, and she knew that we were going to do these exhibits, but unfortunately she passed away before we could finish Jeff's. But she gave us an autobiography that she had written about her life, and we used that autobiography to illustrate her son's life.
And this will be at the Lakewood Library in August, if you want to see it as a traveling exhibit, all 4 students together. And then it will be in our center in the fall, so you can stop by and see these. Well, that's it for us. I don't know if there are any questions, but we're happy to take them.
Well, I have so many questions. I'll try to keep them short, but oh my goodness. Thank you for showing that last picture of the other locations in Ohio where the protests were taking in response to the president's announcement. But it really still surprises me that in Ohio, that this really happened in small town Kent. Why Kent of all places, and not Columbus or Cincinnati or even Cleveland?
Well, it's interesting. There was actually, so we talked about the protest against the Cambodia announcement. That middle of the afternoon, around 2 or 3, there was another protest. It was organized by Black United Students, and that was a protest of what was happening in Ohio, at Ohio State, because African American students in particular were being targeted, and the Black United Students here were protesting in support of them. And so there were violent actions or at other places. Chick Canfora, Alan's sister, talks about going to Ohio State in particular, and they were throwing marshmallows as part of the protest. It is interesting. There's also that weekend, so leading up to our May 4, was it Yale, Lori? I think it's Yale. There's an enormous protest, but the president there tells all the people, all the police, not to bring any weapons. So that is very successful and very peaceful. It is an interesting combination of factors that leads to what happened at Kent. And it's not one, and it's also not the case of, they're just things that were broken. So the president was away, so no one really knew what was happening. To this day, the Guard claims that they were put in charge, but everyone else who was at the meeting where that happened claims that wasn't true. There was no right. They read the Riot Act, but in fact, the Guard wasn't in charge. They didn't file the paperwork until the next day. So it wasn't even that they should have been on campus, and they shouldn't have been locked and loaded. They were locked and loaded for a better part of the day. You're not supposed to aim your gun according to the Ohio Guard handbook if you're not intending to shoot. There's just so many things that are broken, and it's not one of them, it's all of them. And there are lots of examples where this did not happen.
Because one of the Carla was questioning, did the Guard ever provide an official reason for actually shooting, and did they try to cover this up?
So right after the shooting, they pile their guns into a pile. So it's impossible to link one shooter with one shot. So in the trials, it's much tougher to charge a group with murder, especially if there were clearly people who didn't shoot. Correct. Or who didn't aim. Lots of people aimed their guns at the sky, and we know that because they found guns. So that's one component, that it's not, we know who the shooters were, we know who was on the hill, but it's not known who shot whom. There's no way to link them, and there was no way to link them then, forensically. The other thing is, and this is something that people really have a tough time understanding now, is that the public support was in favor of the Guard. Lots of students went home and they have stories of their parents saying, what were you doing? You were asking for it. And that's hard for
shoulda
us to understand. Yeah.
They should have shot more of you.
Oh, goodness.
But this question that Carla asked, what was the official reason? So, right as soon as the firings happened, the guard came out and said that there was a sniper, and they were being fired upon by sniper. And that was, the FBI comes onto campus almost immediately, and they say that there was no sniper fire. So then the guard says they were in fear for their lives, but the closest people to them, they don't even fire at the closest people to them. They really fire toward the most vocal protesters who were in the parking lot at the time. So there are people much closer to them at Taylor Hall at the corner, I mean, maybe 10, 15 feet away, and they don't fire. I mean, if I'm afraid for my life, I'm going to shoot the closest people to me, right? They don't do that. They turn and fire towards the parking lot, which is where the most vocal protesters were. And the thing is, when you're in the Army, which is what the National Guard is supposed to be following the Army's rules of engagement, you just don't fire indiscriminately into a crowd. You pick a person who you're going to fire at. And so they picked people like Alan Canfora, who had been waving a black flag. Earlier in the day, Jeffrey Miller was wearing a maroon cowboy shirt with the white epaulets. He was very visible. He had given them the finger. And so I think at that point, someone said, pay attention to him. He's giving us the finger. Later on, we may, if we fire, we may shoot him. So those things came out, that there was no sniper. They weren't in fear for their lives. They said they were going to be overrun. That didn't bear any fruit.
So what happened with the family? I mean, with all of this cover up and all of this, how did the families receive justice? I mean,
well, so here's the funny thing. So the FBI comes onto campus immediately, and you would think that they would be looking at the guardsmen, like, how could you fire on these students? They're actually looking at the students. So the first thing that happens is 24 Kent State students get charged with inciting a riot, and one Kent State professor. So they're known as the Kent 25. Two of them get convicted. They actually end up overturning their convictions. But that was the mindset. You caused this riot, we're going to charge you. So there's a number of lawsuits that happen, criminal and civil. But what ultimately ends up happening is they settle out of court for a federal civil trial. And
settle out of court with the 4 families or with the 25?
So no, the Kent 25 is different. So they settle out of court with the 4 families of the students that are killed and the 9 wounded students. Okay. And so a total of $650,000 is awarded to all the families. So the students that are killed, their families end up getting $15,000. The bulk of the money, $350,000, goes to Dean Kaler, the student that's paralyzed. And Arthur Krauss, Allison's father, engineered that because he knew Dean Kaler was going to need his house redone for a wheelchair. He was going to need a vehicle, to get him to class that a person in a wheelchair could drive. And then if you were heavily wounded like Dean or Joe Lewis, you got more money. If you were less wounded like Alan Camfora, had a through and through shot in his wrist, he got $15,000. So that's how they divvied up the funds. But that was the only thing. And they also wrote this thing called the Statement of Regret, which the families really wanted an apology. And it's not really even an apology.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but did that come from the Guard or from Kent State University?
It came from the Guardsmen. Well, let me rephrase that. So the governor signed the Statement of Regret. The Guardsmen that fired, the president of the university fired it, or signed the Statement of Regret. So it's not even really an apology. It's really saying we regret what happened and wish, things would have turned out differently, basically.
That's one of the turns of the trials that turned against the students, because imagine being put in a courtroom where all the students who are wounded and all the families of the wounded are together, and they're against all the guardsmen who did the shooting. Remember, some of the guardsmen shot in the air. So they're against all of them, and the governor and the president of the university. So this was not evenly matched. And there have been many, many calls since then to reinvestigate. Every time there's a new attorney general, the families make the case that
Reopen
it
the
should be
case.
looked at again, but that hasn't happened. And I don't know.
So grateful. So there is a museum. I know you spoke about the exhibit that will be at the Lakewood Public Library, and we'll certainly make sure that we share that information so that those here in Euclid can, because Lakewood is not even a 15-minute drive away from us, can see that. But can you tell us about the museum? Like, what are the hours? You said you're currently closed, but when can folks get back in?
Yeah, so the museum now is nearly 10 years old. So we're doing some renovations. It's a heavily interactive and electronic museum. So it was just time to replace some things. So we're doing that. We hope to open to the fall to the public. Now you've got to look to see if there are COVID protocols. I don't think they're going to be. So we hope to open in the public. We will have the exhibit that's going to be at Lakewood at the center for that. So if you didn't see the individual student exhibits, you can see them all together at our place when we open to the public in either later this summer or certainly by August. We don't have a date yet because, like a lot of things, electronics are kind of hard to get a hold of right now. So, and construction is hard to arrange at the moment. So that's all been a little more complicated than we thought.
What is the website where folks can go? Is there some more information online?
For sure, it's www.kent.edu/May4. There are other parts of this story too at Kent. There's also the May 4 archive, and they have a digital depository that grows, it seems like every day. It's amazing. So if you wanted to look at some more images, there's also an oral history program. A lot of that's online. So if you want to look at oral history, if you're interested in giving an oral history, we'd love for you to participate in the Kent State Oral History Project. There's also virtual tours of the site. We just launched May 4, a renovated or enhanced virtual reality tour. So if you can't make it to the site, you can do that. That's on our link from our webpage. There's all kinds of digital exhibits. We've really built that up over COVID. And then we're available too. So you can email May 4. We're not currently doing virtual tours because of the construction, but we can definitely do programs and such like that, things like that.
On the website that you mentioned, do you have a list of, or maybe the Kent State Library has a list of, you mentioned one of the parents had written a book. Do you have a list of books?
Yes, there is a list of books that is kept by the May 4 archive, so you can find that pretty easily. Just off the top of my head, the two that I would mention is This We Know, which is a really short, it's a chapbook. It was actually written by the people who wrote the exhibit. So it follows very much what we talked about. So This We Know. And I would also recommend the book if you're interested in the Kent side of it. So if you really want to learn about Black United Students, SDS, the protest before, the protest after, the best book for that is by Tom Grace, who's one of the students wounded. He's also a historian. And I think that's called Kent State and what is it, Lori, in the aftermath, the long 60s? I can't remember the title.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Okay.
By Tom Grace.
You mentioned Marianne's name.
Vecchio.
Okay. And the article for that, is that, you said the Washington Post?
Yes.
It's also shared in the Akron Beacon Journal. So it's pretty easy, but it's great because it compares her life and how she was negatively impacted. I mean, she was a runaway, her parents found her, she had to go back to Florida. People blamed her for what happened. She was targeted, and it compares that and contrasts it with John Philo, who won a Pulitzer as a kid and now oversees, I think, CBS's photojournalism department. So it's a really interesting look at their different lives.
Dawn, you might want to come back in here so that we can wrap it up, but the young people involved in this, I mean, we're talking about 18 to what, 23, 24-year-olds?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. Who got no support? I mean,
Right.
there was no,
Yeah, that was just heartbreaking when you mentioned that they were immediately shoveled,
they were,
schlepped off campus, and you know, that they were the ones that were attacked and blamed. And
Mhm.
you know, you mentioned that the museum really, the first memorial was in 1990, then 1999. And I know I was a student at Kent in 2003. And so then in 2010, so I'll definitely have to, when you guys reopen, make sure that I come and visit and learn more about this history. It's critically important.
please do. We're really
Yeah, we would love
excited
that.
for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want, and you know, if you're interested in our traveling exhibit, you can think about that too. after.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I didn't want to just, you know, take away from Lakewood. We'll bring it to Euclid as well.
Yeah, we would love
to
that.
have Seriously, we wanted to travel everywhere. It was done by students,
Mhm.
it's about students. It's great.
Writers deserve it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Is there any other questions?
No, I just, you know, to me, I was just fascinated by it because, like I said, I was a young teen when it all actually happened, and you know, I was always interested in learning more. I think that I can't wait to go to Kent State myself and see it. So that's, I'm looking
Awesome.
forward to that.
Thank you.
Here.
Well, thank you so much, Lori and Mindy. I mean, this was truly just fascinating. And, you know, I was not born when this happened, but as an alum of Kent, as a resident of Ohio, and to think about the protests today, the social justice issues that we're facing today, as you were talking, just so many parallels, so many things were coming up. And you know, it's like, have we learned those lessons yet? You know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you both for the information tonight, and we look forward to learning more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.